All set.
Take a deep breath whenever you're ready.
Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Saloka, and I will be presenting to you today about gendered microaggressions in computing classrooms at UMBC. I'm actually going to start off with my acknowledgements. I would like to thank my advisor, Carrie Sauter, for being so helpful. I would like to thank my two faculty mentors, Dr. Stacy Branham and Michelle Benvenga, who is actually in attendance today. I would also like to thank my reader, Jess Myers, and the INDS program as a whole for being so supportive during this entire process. And I would also like to thank my family and friends who are also in attendance today. I'd like to start off with my research question, which is how can we design more effective training programs offered by UMBC for gendered microaggressions and also adapt them for the Comp 101 inclusivity in computing lesson. Now I understand that a lot of you probably don't even know what a gendered microaggression is, so I would like to start off by defining that for you today. So I would like to start off with a real-life example of a microaggression that occurred here on campus at UMBC, courtesy of the Women's Center for telling me this story. Now this occurred in a male-dominated classroom, so that means there were only a few female students compared to a vast majority of male students. A professor said something was the length of a football field, which this female student didn't know the length of. So she raised her hand and asked the professor, "What is the length of a football field?" And the professor responded quite poorly with the response, "You don't know?" And to this, the class responded with laughter. So afterwards, the student felt stupid for asking the question in the first place, embarrassed for not already knowing the answer like her classmates did, isolated from her male classmates because of this difference, and reluctant to ask future questions. Now, this did not only affect this one female student in the course, it actually affected all of the female students who told the Women's Center about this encounter and interaction that happened in the class separately. So it affected all of them individually, not just the one who was directed the microaggression. And the other female students also did not want to ask future questions. So what are microaggressions? They are negative and derogatory messages towards people in marginalized groups. And they can be based on gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality, etc. And they also might be accidental or unintentional. We can take a quick look at the UMBC College of Engineering and Information Technology diagram of its representation of female to male students. And we can see that there's only 21.1% of female students to the male population. And scientists have recently identified microaggressions in STEM learning environments to be one of the causes as to why women leave the field and don't stay in the major. We can take a quick look at UMBC's vision statement, which mentions the words inclusive culture and inquisitive minds from all backgrounds. And we can tell that these computing classrooms are not inclusive of all students, especially female students and minorities. Now let's revisit my research question. How can we design more effective training programs for faculty and staff offered by UMBC for gendered microaggressions and also adapt them for Comp 101's inclusivity in computing lesson? I had to draw on some disciplines to find my answer. So I drew on computer science to examine the difference between my 4-year all-girls high school engineering courses environment and the environment of co-ed classes here offered at UMBC. I also have a background in the objectives in computer science courses that allowed me to build the Comp 101 lesson plan accurately. From education, I was able to draw upon my forming a lesson plan in my education courses, which I could use for the Comp 101 lesson plan. And from sociology, I was able to gauge the effectiveness of this training program and lesson plan. Now, all of these disciplines offered different insights about the problem, so I could use them together to build a complex and multi-causal explanation. So this means I could create a more well-rounded explanation to the problem, rather than just drawing upon one discipline. For example, if I had just drawn upon computer science, there would not be the education and sociology factors involved, and I would not have a full answer. I also used a bridging strategy called bridging the explanation-action gap, which means that I created an explanation for the problem by integrating the computer science and sociology disciplines. And then once I had an explanation to the problem, I created a plan of action through my training program proposed changes and through the lesson plan proposed changes. And I was able to do this by integrating not only computer science and sociology like before, but also integrating education as well. Now, the methodologies that I followed for this project, I actually started in January over winter break. I reviewed the best practices that I had researched for female retention in STEM classroom environments. And I had used 2 different techniques that I learned from Dr. Branham. So that was grounded theory and document analysis. I then identified themes across these resources and compared them to the already existing training program and lesson plan. After that, I wrote a report about the best practices for the training program for educators to increase retention of women in STEM, and I used critical writing techniques that I learned in one of my ethics courses. I then also revised the Comp 101 lesson plan to incorporate the research best practices, but on a student level rather than a faculty and staff level. And I used the lesson plan format that I learned in my education courses. Now I'm going to speak with you about some of the proposed changes that I made to the UMBC training program. I would love to go over all of them with you, but unfortunately we do not have enough time for that. So I just picked 2, and the first one that I picked was to educate faculty on how they subtly treat male and female students differently. And an example of this could be calling on a majority of male students whenever students of both genders are raising their hand. The old training program only included instructor to student as an example of a possible microaggressive relationship. It did not give any examples on how the instructor might be doing this to the student, so whenever faculty and staff took the training program, they were not completely sure or aware of what an example of this might be and if they were actually doing it themselves. And I chose to include this because 20% of female students in technology courses do not feel comfortable asking questions, and 1/3 of those female students lack confidence in their technology skills. And receiving differential treatment from faculty because of gender is definitely a microaggressive behavior. Another proposed change that I made was to inform faculty that female students are more likely to stay in the field if they have a collaborative environment instead of a competitive environment. And the old training program did not mention classroom environment or interaction with peers at all. And this can be seen as an environmental microaggression, so it creates a negative space for female students in STEM. And the lack of collaboration can leave women prone to isolation, which can lead them to drop out. Now, there's already a lot of research that actually studies microaggressions. However, not much of this research actually gives suggestions on how to combat these microaggressions, especially in an educational setting. And the research that does give suggestions just gives it in like a basic list format, whereas the training program that I have modified gives it as a training program that you can give to faculty and staff. And my research can be utilized for any adaptation to an already existing microaggression training or the formation of a new one. Now, I already talked about one of the reasons why there is a low retention rate of women in STEM, which is gendered microaggressions in classrooms. However, there are many more reasons why there might be a low retention rate in STEM. Some of these being stereotype threat and a general lack of support. And of course, there's many, many more that are being studied now. Here are my resources. And does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Liz. We invite questions from the floor.
My question has to do with your recommendations. How would they apply to a subject like nursing, where it's exact flip? It's 80% women and 20% men, and they're trying to keep the men they have to attract more. Would they apply the same way?
Honestly, I'm not quite sure because the research that has been done has been on female students, and we don't know if the behavior for retention rates would be the same for male students or if there's a different type of behavior that should be achieved. So because male and female students, of course, are different in what interests them. So these are definitely gender specific to female. There would have to be research done on specifically male students to find that out, but I imagine that some of them will probably be similar.
question about your original example of the gender microaggression in the classroom.
Mhm.
I understand how there's like this cultural perception that women are less involved in sports, or sports is something more masculine. I'm not sure about the validity of that, but I didn't understand how that example was specifically gendered, mostly because like the vagueness of the professor's response. I understand that it was a poor response. I agree with that. I failed to see like the gendered aspect of it. Could you clarify that, please?
Yeah, of course. I know that, like you said, sports are stereotypically a male-dominated interest and not specifically a female one. So another example that I could give would be making like a video game reference, or making a like stereotypically nerdy movie reference or something like that. Those are seen as microaggressions towards women, as women are not typically involved in those types of things. So although there are women that are interested in that, and there probably are men that are not interested in sports, of course, it's seen as a gendered microaggression because of the vast majority of students of both gender have these stereotypical interests.
So, Liz, I'm going to ask you this question because you're about to graduate, and so you can answer, and it doesn't matter. How much do you think faculty actually want to change? Right, so you have these classes where you're trying to give faculty some instruction about how to be more inclusive and all of that sort of stuff. Faculty, do they want to be any different than what they are? Do they think that the status quo is fine?
I mean, I know that we would all imagine that faculty wants to change and be the best that they can for their students, but I'm sure that's not true of all faculty. I'm sure that some faculty definitely just wants to like get in there, teach their subject, and then leave. So I would want all faculty and staff to genuinely care about their students and try to get the best for all of their students. But honestly, I would not be able to tell you if faculty genuinely cares, because I think that's a personal question for each member of the faculty.
So you had mentioned there are a lot